So, moving on to the project management processes. Let's first try to understand what a process is. You must have worked on numerous processes, and whenever we work on a process, we always come across a series of activities that are mentioned in it. These activities must be performed one by one, and they are interdependent on each other. Whenever we work on any process, there is always a predefined objective that we try to achieve. For example, if it is a requirements gathering process, there is a predefined objective that by the end of this process, I should be able to produce a requirement specification document. This document will then be analyzed further in order to create a design for the product I am working on. There is always some predefined objective, like whenever we start working on a project, there is some objective in mind. It could be a product, service, or result as an outcome that we aim for. So, that's a process. If you take any process, you will always find these characteristics of a process. Whenever we work on any process, we always have a few things that we need to take into consideration. There will always be some inputs to the process. When we work on a process, we need to refer to some of those inputs. Then, we always use certain tools and techniques that help us work through the process efficiently. Additionally, we always have some outcomes, meaning certain outputs that we get at the end of the process. Let's take a quick example. For instance, you are working on a process related to scope management. As part of the scope management process, you would refer to certain inputs such as the project charter, project management plan, quality management plan, or project life cycle descriptions. These elements define the development approach, and all of this information is given as part of your project management plan. You would also refer to enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets so that you can access ready-made templates as part of the organizational process assets, OPA. These are the inputs that I would refer to when I start working on scope management. Now, what kinds of tools and techniques can I use? One of the tools and techniques that I can start using is expert judgment. I can identify individuals who have worked on scope management before, are subject matter experts, or have extensive experience in the field. I would seek their judgment and take their views and inputs on the process. Expert judgment is a simple yet very useful technique that can be quickly applied. Another technique we could use is alternative analysis. I can explore different alternatives that are available and determine the best course of action. Another simple tool is conducting meetings. I can conduct meetings with stakeholders to understand their expectations regarding the product we are building. Additionally, I could run surveys or use questionnaires. There are many different tools and techniques that can be used to gather requirements as part of scope management. By the end of this process, what output can I expect? The primary output is the scope management plan, which helps in understanding the overall approach to scope management within the project. Additionally, I would have the requirements management plan, which defines how requirements will be managed throughout the project. This includes handling new requirements that arise even after the project has started. The agreed-upon approach for managing these requirements as a team is also documented. This is just one quick example. Whenever we come across a process, always remember that there are certain inputs that need to be used to initiate the process. We also need to use certain tools and techniques to make the process more efficient and effective. Furthermore, there will always be an expected output at the end of the process. It is essential to know what the expected output is before starting the process. That is the essence of a process. Of course, we are going to learn more about processes as we proceed. We will cover 49 processes that are part of the PMBOK Guide, 6th edition. As part of the examination, we should be aware of all these processes, their inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. At times, this might seem confusing, but once you understand the context, it becomes much easier to relate to. From here, we will move on to a different topic, tailoring. This topic has been introduced in the 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide. It was not included in previous editions, and I completely appreciate the fact that PMI has decided to include it in the 6th edition. As a project manager, this is very important. This is where we get the opportunity to implement and practice the knowledge and skills that we have learned over time. What do we typically do in this tailoring? So, this is the area where we actually select an appropriate process, tools, inputs, and outputs. Meek's life cycle is based on the kind of project that I'm working on. It could also depend on the kind of project constraints I will be coming across, or the kind of governance expectations on the project, the culture, or, for that matter, the customers I'm catering to. The project manager is the one who will ultimately be doing this. For that, the project manager needs to collaborate with multiple stakeholders to ensure that the process is tailored based on these factors that I just discussed. Every organization will have its own project management methods to suit them and provide additional tailoring guidelines for individual projects. The bigger the organization, the more complex it becomes. I have seen that complexity increases, especially when there is a lot of demand and a significant need from the governance point of view. If you do not manage or tailor your process well, you might end up in trouble. Therefore, it is very important to tailor the process based on the kind of project you are working on, the constraints you are handling, and the governance requirements you have for your project. For example, let's say we were working on a project with very high complexity because multiple stakeholders were involved. Not only that, but these stakeholders were also from different time zones. We had to use certain tools to ensure that all stakeholders collaborated effectively because that was our biggest challenge. Hence, we started using tools such as Confluence and Jira. These tools helped us ensure that, even though our team members and stakeholders were distributed, we could still perform tasks smoothly. We had to make use of various tools, such as Jira and Confluence, for collaboration. Additionally, we used video conferencing and other tools to help us come together for meetings and discussions. Even if team members were working in different time zones with no overlap, all completed activities were updated so that when another person started working, they knew exactly what tasks to pick up next. This kind of tailoring really helped us navigate the complexity of the project, particularly regarding distributed teams and stakeholders. This is just a quick example, but as we go ahead in this training, we will explore more examples. Based on the context, we will discuss various scenarios and determine what works best. Now, let's move on to what we discussed earlier about the project management process. As I mentioned, in terms of PMI and PMP, there are certain process groups that you may have read about. If you have already started reading about PMBOK, you might be familiar with the 5 different process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, closing. These 5 process groups are part of the PMBOK guide. The process groups encompass approximately 49 processes, which are mapped accordingly. For example, initiating has 2 processes, planning has 24, executing has 10, monitoring and controlling has 12, and closing has only 1. One important point to remember is that these are not project phases. Sometimes, it may seem like they are, as we initiate a project, then plan, execute, monitor, control, and finally close it. However, they are actually domains of project management from PMI's or PMBOK's perspective. These process groups are present in every phase of a project. For example, if we take a phase like requirement gathering, we first initiate requirement gathering, then plan how we will collect requirements. After planning, we execute by conducting interviews, running surveys, or organizing focus group exercises. Throughout this, we also monitor and control the process to ensure it aligns with the requirements or scope management plan. Finally, when the process is complete, we close it by reviewing the output. For example, we may have a requirement specification document or a requirement management plan. Once these are in place, we can formally close the process. This is just a quick example, but you can see how these process groups fit into various project phases. They are not project phases themselves but rather overarching domains that integrate into different phases of the project. Apart from the process groups, we also have knowledge areas. So initially, there were 9, but now we have embarked on guiding the process. In fact, the previous edition itself added the new knowledge area, which is stakeholder management. So now we've got 10 knowledge areas. Starting with integration management, it is one of the biggest, in fact, among these 10 knowledge areas. Then we have scope management, schedule management, cost management, quality management, resource management, communications management, risk management, procurement, and stakeholder management. As you can see here, the various processes belong to these knowledge areas, and I'll give you another view which will also help you in getting a clearer idea about how these knowledge areas and the process groups and the different processes fit together. This will give us a larger picture about the knowledge areas, process groups, and the various processes. As you can see here, these are the processes. The leftmost column is nothing but the different knowledge areas, and the ones you see at the top are the different processes that we have, so in getting, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Then, there are these 49 processes. Just to give you one example, for instance, project integration management would cut across all the process groups because, when it comes to integration, we are integrating the activities that we are performing or the processes that we are performing as a part of these various process groups. That means project integration management is definitely one of the biggest knowledge areas. Then, scope management would have mainly the planning part and a bit of monitoring and controlling. Schedule management will mostly be in planning and monitoring and controlling. But if you see, closing is the smallest one, so it has only one process in that. This is how the 49 processes are mapped across the process groups and the different knowledge areas. I'm sure this must have given you a clearer idea about what we need to study as part of the exam. As part of the examination, we have to study how these processes, knowledge areas, and 49 processes are interlinked. We also need to go through all of these processes and understand them one by one as far as this training is concerned. This training is organized by knowledge areas, so you will find each and every module in this training is based on the knowledge areas. We'll be starting, for example, with a module on integration management. Then we'll move on to scope management, and likewise, there are various modules in this training which are based on the knowledge areas. Now, let's talk a bit about the processes, the various processes that we just saw. There are 49 of them. There are a few things that I just want to highlight about them. You will find these processes, which sometimes are used only once or at a predefined point in the project. For example, it could be the project charter or closing the project or phase. So, once you create a project charter at the beginning of the project, you just keep referring to it. You don't have to modify it unless there is an impact. But of course, you go on modifying it if there is an impact. Once you have it for the whole project, and that is something which empowers you as a project manager and gives you the authority to use all the resources required for the project. Similarly, even the close project phase has only one process, and it is just used during the last phase, which is nothing but closing. Similarly, you will find there are certain processes which are performed periodically. One example could be acquiring resources. Now, resources are required on the project throughout, so whenever we acquire resources, we need to refer to this process, or for that matter, conduct procurement. We need to perform procurement-related activities throughout the project. These are periodically performed processes. On the other hand, there are certain processes which are to be performed on a continuous basis throughout the project, like defining activities. So, you'll find we need to keep defining activities as part of each and every process. You will always have activities because a process will have different activities that are linked. Another example is monitoring and controlling activities. Again, these activities are part of almost all the knowledge areas. These activities need to be performed on a continuous basis. This is a bit on the processes that we are going to cover as part of this training. Anyway, from there, we are going to move on to project management data and information. While working on the project, you will be gathering lots of data. You should have a strategy in place in terms of how you are going to deal with that data, what kind of information, what kind of metrics you should be preparing. Most of the time, I have seen that unless you are in a very small company, there is always some project management information system, PMIS, that is used, which could be something like the one you may already be using from Microsoft, MS Project Act, or it could be from CA Technologies Clarity. So whichever tool that you are using, or it could be simply an Excel-based PMIS tool that you are using currently in your project. Whichever tool you are using, typically what happens is that all the work performance-related data is captured as a part of the tool. So right from the planning activities to executing the activities and capturing the actuals, and maybe completion of tasks, etc., all this information is captured. This tool, which is PMIS, or whatever tool you are using, actually helps. Now, based on that data, you will have to actually come up with the work performance information. Typically, what's done is that the data is collected from various controlling processes, analyzed in context, and integrated based on the relationships across areas. You'll find that data is gathered from different perspectives. Let's say, from a cost point of view or from a schedule point of view, if I have to give you two quick examples, how are we doing in terms of cost? How are we doing in terms of schedule? We also take into consideration the cost performance index and schedule performance index. So are we ahead of schedule or are we behind schedule? Are we overspending or are we underspending? Typically, all this information is analyzed based on the data that is gathered, and then we create different work performance reports. These reports are then shared with the team and with the stakeholders. Now, these reports follow certain standard formats. Again, the reports will include information on how we are performing against the project management plan. So, 44444, that's what the report information would typically contain. From a scale point of view, a cost point of view, a scope point of view, and a risk point of view, all these constraints need to be represented concisely and succinctly in the report, which is then shared with the team as well as with the management. Now, if you look at this particular diagram, you will find that we gather all the data through the PMIS, then we work on the performance information, right? I gave you a few examples. Then, we create reports. These reports are then shared with the team members as well as the stakeholders through project communication management. Whenever a project change is introduced, it goes through project change control. Now, whatever change is incorporated at any point in the project, it is either approved or rejected. If the change is approved, it goes back to the execution process, and the same steps are followed. All this information is again shared with the team members and stakeholders. This is what typically happens concerning data and information on the project because there is a lot of data and a lot of information available. We need to analyze it, ensure that we are using it effectively, and communicate it to the right people at the right time. Most importantly, we are also making certain decisions to take preventive and corrective actions. That's the most important thing from the data point of view. From there, we now move on to discussing project management documents. Especially from the business side, you will find a couple of key documents, as I mentioned earlier, the project business case and the project benefits management plan. These documents are developed by the sponsor, and the project manager's responsibility is to align the project plan with the business case or the benefits management plan. Even the project success measures, organizational goals, and most importantly, some of these documents must be tailored to align with the program's business case. That's where the project manager comes into the picture, to establish an overall alignment with the business case. Ultimately, the business case and the benefits management plan are the most important documents from a business perspective. Whatever activities are performed on the project need to align with these, so that they help achieve the ultimate objective of the business. That's where the project manager plays a critical role. Now, Let's also take a look at the interrelationships of how the need is assessed and how critical business project documents come into play. From a high-level point of view, as a project manager, sometimes not everyone has this perspective, but it is good to have. As I mentioned, some need assessments may have been done, triggering the business case, which then leads to the creation of a benefits management plan. For example, let's say you are working in a certain service line or line of business, and suddenly, strategically, you decide that you want to move to a digital platform. A needs assessment must have been conducted, revealing that all competitors have gone digital and that it is essential for you to do the same. Based on this need assessment, a business case is created. If you have to go digital, what kind of business is it? How much investment is required? What are the available options and alternatives? What is the best possible alternative? What kind of benefits would be gained once the chosen solution is implemented? These aspects are captured in the benefits management plan. Once this is agreed upon from the business side, the business sponsor prepares these two documents, the business case and the benefits management plan. The sponsor then hands them over to the project manager. Additionally, the project charter is prepared and handed to the project manager. At this point, the project manager is formally authorized to use resources on the project and is formally engaged with the project. All these are nothing but the pre-project work. Now, these three project works are important because ultimately, this is the one that will trigger the project. Once we have a project charter in place, we kickstart the project activities. Then, you will come across various preparation parts of the project. You would also work on the project management plan based on the project charter, and then you would typically carry out the execution of the project management plan activities. Once you complete all the phases, you will close it. This is how some of the key documents typically fall into place through these various phases and the project life cycle. Now, as an example, we will take some of these documents and try to learn about them. What do all these documents usually contain? Starting with the project business case. If you look at the project business case, what would it have? Of course, I am going to show you the actual business case so that you will get a fair idea. Now, moving on to the project business case. This is what we were talking about. A business case typically includes a need assessment, which we just referred to. There are various evaluation criteria. It would also have some pre-project work activities. Most importantly, it defines project success and how it will be measured. At the same time, it addresses how success can be maintained throughout the project. Of course, recommendations, go-no-go decisions, business needs, and problem areas are included. Why is this project necessary? What are some of the goals or root causes, and what are the recommendations? The best thing I am going to do is take you through the business case itself very quickly so that you can understand exactly what is covered as part of the business case. This is just an example of the business case for a project, and I will read through it, not everything, of course, but only the key points, so that you can understand and relate to what we just discussed about the business case. Now, talking about the executive summary. For this business case, for example, the document outlines how the web platform project will address current business concerns, the benefits of the project, recommendations, and justifications. The business case also discusses detailed project goals, performance measures, assumptions, constraints, and alternative options. This tells me that the project is about a web platform. So, what was the issue the business was facing that led to the initiation of this project? Due to an expanding client base, Smith Consulting has moved to a decentralized business model over the last 2 years. As they continue to support more clients in more locations, workforce administration has become more difficult. Until now, many internal requirements such as reporting, payroll activities, and resource management have been handled via legacy mainframe systems. This information gives us an idea about why the project was initiated. There were many decentralized activities being performed, but now they want to centralize them. Obviously, there is a cost benefit as well. What are the anticipated outcomes? Moving to a centralized, web-based administrative platform will not only improve ease of operation but also reduce costs. What are the recommendations? Various options and alternatives were analyzed to determine the best way to leverage technology to improve business processes and reduce costs within Smith Consulting. The approach described here allows the company to meet its corporate objectives of continuously improving efficiency. This is very important. The ultimate objective here, at a corporate level, is improving efficiency, reducing costs, and capitalizing on technology. Since some technology is already in place, the question is whether it can be leveraged to achieve these business objectives. This must have given you an idea of the problem area, why this project was initiated, and how it aligns with Smith Consulting's overall objectives. The justification for this project is the migration of payroll and other administrative functions from the legacy mainframe system to a web-based platform, which will result in greater efficiency in company resources and business processes. Here, we are mainly talking about efficiency. If you notice, this particular project is directly aligned with the organization's goals and objectives. In this case, one of the main goals is efficiency gains and cost savings. Moving to the web-based platform completely aligns with this objective. Another important thing to focus on is the expected benefits. What specific benefits are anticipated? Here, it is clearly stated: a 15% reduction in overhead costs in the first 12 months. A 10% decrease in employee turnover in the first 12 months. A 50% immediate decrease in the time required to generate weekly and monthly financial reports. It is important to capture this data objectively so that we can measure progress. This will also be a part of the business benefits management plan, which we will discuss later. When we get to that topic, you will be able to relate to it as well.